Well, we might as well call him Lewis Hamilton because it appears that Deshaun Watson is in pole position to win the Browns' starting quarterback job. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or if you are new here, then please do me a favour and hit that subscribe button. So, Browns started OTAs last week, and to be honest, we've not actually had that much news stuff come out of it. If anything, the last week has been pretty terrible in Cleveland sports. Cavs getting absolutely embarrassed, ran out of the gym in the conference finals, on their way to getting swept by the Knicks. Hopefully the San Antonio Spurs could do us all a favour and shut those guys up in the finals. Even the Guardians have dropped a couple after looking like they were one of the hottest teams in baseball. And of course, with the Browns, even though, football season is still not even remotely close, we can smell it a little bit. And, that doesn't change the fact that Browns Twitter is as fun as Browns Twitter always is, with the debates about, Browns quarterback competition at OTAs, how much stock should we put into it when they're not wearing pads and all of that stuff. Just another day being a Cleveland sports fan, Cleveland media crying again. Apparently it's their fault that the Browns suck. That's what Jason Lloyd has come out and said. So just another day in Cleveland sports, guys. Want to keep this one fairly quick because, as I said, there's not actually too much to talk about. But just give my quick thoughts on kind of where we are at with OTAs right now. And that obviously starts with Deshaun Watson and Shedeur Sanders. Now, it's an interesting discussion, and it's also a somewhat pointless discussion as well, where some of this stuff is going, because, on the one hand, you've got people saying, well, it doesn't matter, they're in OTAs, none of this stuff matters. Pretty sure they're the same people that were saying last year that it does matter whenever a certain quarterback looked good in one clip that we saw. As far as I'm concerned, everything that I've been hearing, everyone that I've spoken to who I trust that have actually been there, have seen this stuff live in action, as well as obviously what they've heard from people there as well. It does appear that Deshaun Watson looks like the best quarterback in camp. Now, if you watched my last video on this, if you watched any of my videos on this in the last 6 to 8 months, whatever it's been, you'll know that that's not a surprise to me. I made it very clear. I said back in January, I believe, that if we do go into this offseason, if we do go into OTAs, with a quarterback room of Deshaun Watson, Shedeur Sanders, and Dylan Gabriel, obviously added Taylor Green into that, then Deshaun Watson was going to win the job and look like the best quarterback in OTAs. The reason I believe that is because this is a nearly 10-year vet. Yes, he's absolutely sucked during his time at Cleveland, but there's a reason why this guy was a first-round pick back in 2017. There's a reason why this guy was a 3-time Pro Bowler. There's a reason why, not just the Browns, but many teams were willing to give up 3 first-round picks and a hell of a lot of money for him. You don't just lose that talent overnight. Yes, I don't think he can play in the NFL anymore, really, because his head is cooked. But as I kept saying, that doesn't matter when you're playing in shorts and a T-shirt. And what's happened, they're playing in shorts and a T-shirt. And Deshaun Watson looks like the best guy out there. I'm not going to buy into any of the, he looks the best that he's ever looked here in Cleveland. I know some people are going a little bit too far with this. I'm looking at you, Jeremy, and the Cardiac Kid out there on Twitter. I'm not going to go too far and say, that's it. 2020 Deshaun Watson is going to be back this year. As I said, I don't think that the guy has the mental capacity to play NFL to play quarterback at a high level in the NFL. But that doesn't mean that he's going to look bad in OTAs, and that's what I kept saying, and that's what has happened and what we are seeing. You look at how the reps have been distributed. Yes, obviously, this is just from what we can see, the practices that the media are at, because I have to keep reminding everyone, they practice more than just the times that the media are there. It's kind of like, a couple of weeks ago, everyone was saying, well, how can we be saying this when there's only been 2 practices? No, there's been a lot more than 2 practices. It's just there's only been 2 practices that the media were at. But basing off what we have seen from those limited practices that the media have been at, Deshaun Watson is getting most of the reps, followed by Shedeur Sanders. To be honest, it's pretty much Shedeur and Deshaun getting all of the reps. Taylor Green, I believe, in the last practice that the media were allowed to be at, got 0 reps. So whether or not they are trying to sabotage this year's late round pick is obviously a discussion to have for another day. But no, it's just, I'm not surprised by any of this. This is exactly what I expected to happen. So it's hard for me to be surprised. It's hard for me to be annoyed at this. And as I said, and I've said before, I don't want Deshaun Watson to be the starting quarterback. I would much prefer to see what we have in Shedeur Sanders. And this is coming from someone that has criticised Shedeur Sanders and has pushed back on the whole, he is our starter and all of this stuff. And even I would much rather watch Shedeur Sanders. But unfortunately, it's the NFL. That's not how this stuff works. We don't, you don't pick starters. You don't pick players based on vibes. You pick it based on what you're seeing. And clearly, I think what they are seeing is that Deshaun Watson looks like the best guy out there. A lot of people are going to ask, well, how on earth can we do this? Like, he's going to just get booed off the field and he's looked so bad and all of this stuff. And at the end of the day, the only answer for that is it's a new coaching staff. And, if Kevin Stefanski was still here, I would say absolutely 0% chance that Deshaun Watson was going to be starting. But whole new coaching staff on the offensive side of the ball, whole new group of people that can convince themselves that they can squeeze a little bit more out of Deshaun Watson. It was just so obvious that this is where we were going. This is why I advocated, the Browns to bring in, adequate competition this off-season. They didn't do that, and this is the result of that. From what we've seen, there's been some clips that you can say they've looked good and stuff, but as I said, it's hard for me to put any stock into this stuff from what we've seen with Deshaun Watson when, as I said, when it comes time to play on the field, all the evidence would suggest it's not going to look like it did in OTAs. But in the same breath, I do somewhat push back on the whole, you can't take anything from OTAs because they are playing without pads on. Now, don't get me wrong. Offensive line, defensive line, you cannot make any assessment, any judgment on any of those guys when they're playing in shorts and t-shirts. Completely accept that. That is something that you just can't do. But skill positions and quarterback, we're just lying if we're saying that there's just nothing you can take from that. That is just not true at all. And especially skill positions, you don't need pads on to be able to catch a ball. You don't need pads on to run routes. You can clearly see what guys have, higher skill sets than others. There's a reason why Denzel Boston and KC Conception look as good as they do compared to other wide receivers in this Browns training OTAs, even if they are playing without pads. So, offensive line, defensive line, we can't really take anything out of that. But the whole, we can't do anything. We can't take anything away from this. None of this means anything when it comes to the quarterbacks. I don't think that's true at all. And don't get me wrong, not saying that means that what we've seen from Deshaun in OTAs is what we're going to see, week one. But I do think you have to put a little bit of stock into it. And if one guy does clearly look like the better player, then the chances are that's probably the direction they are going to go in. Don't get me wrong, we've still got a lot of time to go. We've still got more OTAs to get through. We've obviously got training camp to get through. I think we will have an idea by training camp. Monken has said the last couple of months that they want to have an idea of who the quarterback one is going into training camp. So we're not doing the whole competition stuff as much at training camp, and we're divvying out those reps to the guys that actually need to be ready to play week one. So obviously still a long way to go, but as I said, as the title of this video will be, it is Deshaun Watson in pole position. I think to argue against that is just cope at this point, and I don't blame people. I completely understand why a lot of people don't want to see this man anywhere near the field again wearing Cleveland Browns uniform, but unfortunately that's just where we are, and I believe to deny that is to just, as I said, I think that's cope, and I think that's where we're at. The offense as a whole hasn't looked great, to be honest. Everything we've seen, it does appear that they've been quite sloppy. And, yes, we've seen some good clips from, from Deshaun Watson. We've seen a couple of good clips from Shadur, etc., etc. But the overriding kind of takeaway does seem to be that the offense is a bit sloppy. That's to be expected at this time of the year, especially obviously when you've got an entire new offensive staff, implementing a new offensive scheme. That should be somewhat expected, but it is a little bit worrying when they are basically going up against the skeleton crew of the defense. I mean, Miles isn't out there. Isaiah McGuire isn't out there. I don't think Alex Wright's been practicing much. Mason Graham's barely been practicing. Malik Collins isn't out there. Mike Hall's not been out there since he looked like he picked up a knee injury. So obviously we'll wait to see more on that and obviously talk about that then. So hopefully that's not too serious. But, as I said, it is to be expected. But, there is some concern with the offense being as sloppy when they are going up against these skeleton crew of a defense. And I think the main worry should just kind of be how some of these balls are coming out of the quarterback's hands and how some of these balls are coming out of the wide receiver's hands with some of the drops that we've seen. And I'm not even going to mention KC Conception because that is my pookie and you will not criticise KC Conception on my watch, not until it is justified. But as I said, we've seen some good stuff, but we've also seen some bad stuff. And with those receivers as well, I kind of mentioned it earlier, but everyone that I've spoken to says that Denzel Boston looks legit. They say that KC Conception looks legit. So that's good news. That's things that you want to see. These are two guys that should look better than everyone else there at that receiver position, even as rookies. And, everything that I've seen, everything that I've heard appears to be that they are. So, as I said, we're in this kind of weird spot of the off season where it's like, I want more football, etc., etc. But unfortunately, it's just we're not able to see that much just because of how these practices are kind of scheduled with the media, etc. as well. But from what I have seen, some good stuff, some bad stuff. Nothing to get overly excited about, but nothing to get overly concerned about, shall we say. We're just kind of in that middling period of, let's get to when this is no longer voluntary. This is mandatory. We can see a little bit more effort. We can get these guys in pads. We can see obviously that. And hopefully we can see if Myles Garrett actually turns up for when it's mandatory. Don't get me wrong. I've got no problem with him not turning up when it's voluntary. This is Myles Garrett. He's done it every year and it doesn't seem to have any issue on how he plays on the field. But obviously there will be a story if he's not there for mandatory camp, which I don't expect to be the case, but we'll have to wait and see. But as I said, there's just not too much to really go off at the minute. We're kind of just going off 5-second clips. And, if you do know anyone that has been at these OTA practices and obviously what they can tell you as well. But I think the overriding story so far, biggest takeaway from OTAs is that Deshaun Watson, surprise, surprise, looks like he is in pole position to win the Browns starting quarterback job. Again, we'll have to wait and see. There is still plenty of practices to have, plenty of football to be played until we get to that decision. But, I tried to warn people in January. I tried to warn people in February, March, April. We're now in May, last day of May as of recording. And I still feel the exact same way. And I think a lot of other people are probably starting to come on board with that as well. On board, I mean by accepting, accepting it, not enjoying it per se. But that's just where we are at. And don't get me wrong. It's the NFL. If Deshaun Watson does go out there and balls out and plays well, I'm sure a lot of us will shut up for the time being because the football team is winning. And we're all hypocrites. That's just how this stuff works. But obviously, it's a lot easier to pile on it when we're 0-0, we're in the off season, and we're not winning football games. People will say he's going to get booed off the field. They probably welcome the fact that 6 of their first 9 games are road games. And as I said, if the Browns are 5-0 to start the season, I'm sure even the most grandstanding of us fans that can sit here and say that we don't want this to happen are going to swallow all of that and say, well, the team is winning. That's just the NFL. That's what most NFL fans are, myself included. We're pretty hypocritical when it comes to this stuff. But let's wait and see. As I said, still a lot more football to be played, a lot more practices to be had throughout the off-season, and let's see where we're at then. But that will do it for me today. As I said, not too much to talk about. Cleveland sports have just been disappointing me this week, to be honest. I'm actually surprised I've even managed to put this hat on after how pathetic of a performance that was from the Cavs, to only then find out that they are just running it back again next season. Don't get me wrong, the Pacers ran it back after their conference final appearance, made it to the finals. The Knicks ran it back after theirs, made it to the finals. Can the Browns repeat that kind of history? I doubt it, but we'll have to wait and see. But that would do it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think that Deshaun Watson is in pole position? Do you push back on all of that? And you are one of these people that think, no, it's OTAs. We can't take any stock into this yet. Let's wait until training camp. Let me know your thoughts on the Browns OTAs and, of course, the quarterback battle in the comments below. But that would do it for me today. Thank you so much for watching. If you do enjoy my content, then please drop this video a like, hit that subscribe button. It's free, but it really helps out my channel. You can also check the links in the description to see where you can follow and interact with me on social media. As I always say, I'm trying to build a community of Cleveland Browns fans, and even if that means I only get to talk to one fan a day, I'm happy because I'm talking Browns football with the best fan base in the world. Thanks again for watching, guys. Have an amazing rest of your weekend. Enjoy next week. Enjoy the NBA Finals. But most importantly, go Browns.